Yo, 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 what's going on? It's the NOC, the Nerds of Color. It's your boy, Kuya P, a.k.a. the Dobro, the Babinka boy, the leader of the Holla Holla homies in the center gang, a.k.a. Patrick Michael Strange. And I'm here with the Lechon ladies, the Deginawan Destroyers, the Sisig Supremes, the Amazing Ates. What's up, Kataphorric and Viva, Valentina?
Hey, what up?
Hey, Kuya
What's up?
P.
Hey, good to see y'all. Always putting a smile on my face. We have another amazing one for the people today. Eileen Cabiling, an amazing filmmaker. She has this amazing film called Basurero that you're going to want to check out. Based on some true events, it's a fictional story about a Filipino fisherman who drops bodies into the water because of this drug trade. But you're going to learn a lot more about it, and you're going to learn about this amazing award-winning short film, as well as Eileen and just her greatness, her origin story, because she's a hero to us, and every hero needs an origin story. So we're going to tell it today. But before we do that, you're going to check out the trailer right now. Here we go.
Ang dagat na walang mahuli ay isang palengkeng walang isda. Tulad ng pitakang walang pera.
Tanganlet, di mo na naman ako babayaran. Sumbong kaya kat sa mga vigilante. Para sa basura.
Boom! There you go. Basurero, Miss Eileen Cabiling. Hey! Air horns. All right. We made it. How are you, Eileen?
So awesome to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you
definitely.
for that amazing intro.
I try to kick it off with excitement because it's going to reflect how we feel, because we're so honored to have you here. So definitely have to give you that. You deserve that.
Well, yeah, I feel really honored to be here. So thank you.
Definitely, definitely. So I'm going to kick it off with Tina, Viva Valentina, who starts us off as usual. So Tina, let's go. Here we go.
So Eileen, we always like to start off because we want to know, where are you from? But like, where are you really from? or like, where are your parents from? My parents. Okay, so my parents are from the Philippines. My mom is from Mindanao, which is the most southern island of the Philippines, from near Davao City, which is a big city way down south. And then my dad pretty much grew up in Manila. And his family's from an area called Pampanga, which is kind of north of Manila. And I think he was born in Tondo. Yeah. So they immigrated here. They immigrated from the United States, and then I was born here.
Excellent. And the reason we ask that is to also play off of that ridiculousness that we always get as, immigrants and just Asian Americans here living in the US. So, but also I feel as a father myself, we are manifestations of their hopes and dreams. And so we want to celebrate them and who they are, and also see if that some of that love kind of came from them to you. In regards to what you do. So do you know a little bit about your parents' love story, how they kind of came together before you came into the picture of them, meeting each other in the Philippines? Do you know that info?
Yeah. I think my dad courted my mom. So my parents are both doctors. And so they came when they met in medical school. They went to this really old school in the Philippines. I think it might be one of the oldest schools in the Philippines. It's called the University of Santo Tomas.
Okay.
And I think it was founded by like
Spanish friars or something. But yeah, so my parents met in med school. Yeah. And then my
Awesome.
mom kind of came here first, and then my dad followed. And in the 70s, they, believe it or not, the U.S. was had a shortage of physicians, of doctors. So
Mm.
yeah, so they were able to come in on a visa that sponsored them. They came in and did, I think, the residencies as well and all of that, and then they were able to get their paperwork and everything because at that time in the 70s there was a shortage of doctors in the United States, believe it or not.
Wow. Okay.
I know, it's fascinating, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, so
Where did you they so when they came here, where did they first settle? Was it here in Richmond? Did you because you're I know you're from
um,
Richmond. Where did they first come when they came over?
Baltimore, and then we were in Richmond. Yeah, pretty
Okay.
early on, I think. And Richmond, I think my parents were trying to choose whether to live in Chicago or Richmond, and they chose Richmond because it was kind of a small city back then, in the 70s, and it was like, yeah, it was not a huge city yet like Chicago.
Yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah. Compared to Chicago, Richmond is like
Yeah, and it was crazy weird because my parents stayed in touch with a lot of their barkada, is what we call it.
Yeah.
Barkada, their group of friends in the Philippines, and so they all kind of, a bunch of them also settled in Virginia as well, but not in Richmond, in Fredericksburg, which is like kind of between
Yeah.
Richmond and DC. So there's like a big community of Filipino doctors in Fredericksburg, and a lot of them were my parents' classmates or friends, or they all kind of trained together or were sponsored together. So I kind of grew up with that Filipino community. I mean, I grew up, we were the only Filipinos, I think, in my neighborhood and at school and stuff. But we would always go on these trips, jump in the station wagon and drive up to Fredericksburg and hang out with the other Filipino doctors and kids. So that was kind of my community of Filipinos growing up. So I really, for the most part, thought that all Filipinos were doctors growing up. I thought they were all doctors. Yeah, it was weird. I was just, I mean, up until I was like in high school or something, I was like, oh, wait a minute, there's other kinds of Filipinos. But yeah,
Yeah.
I just grew up with all these Filipino kids whose parents were doctors too. So,
Oh wow. I'm like kind of blown by this because I like when you were saying they came over and came to Richmond and Chicago, I was like, did also, and this is also going to be a question, like, did any other relatives come over? But I was thinking, more so Chicago because there's such a larger Filipino population in Chicago. I didn't think Richmond had much. I know Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach area because of the military. And I'm kind of surprised by Fredericksburg. So like, oh wow. But I have like, yeah, I go there every now and then because my wife went to university. Well, now it's University of Mary Washington, but she went to Mary Washington College at the time when we were dating and everything. So I'm like, oh wow. So there's a whole kind of Filipino pocket down there that I haven't encountered. So I'm like, whoa. So
yeah.
so you had kind of a community, but did any other relatives come over as well? Did you see them, or was it just more so just your parents and the community that you found?
Whenever I would meet like another Filipino kid, I would just be super fascinated. You know what I mean? Because there weren't a lot in Richmond.
Okay.
Yes. So over time, my family immigrated. So my
Oh,
mom was kind of the first one in her immediate family, but we had like her cousins that were already up in New Jersey and stuff. But then eventually, my aunt came. My aunt came, and she was kind of like our babysitter. My grandmother came, but my grandmother would come and go. And then my uncle eventually came, and he was an engineer in the Philippines, yeah, he was an engineer in the Philippines, but then, of course, he went to nursing school when he got here because that was the way that, my family thought that he could get a job, And then eventually I had another aunt settle, and then I had cousins come as well. I had another aunt who was working. So in the Philippines, a lot of people, it's known for overseas workers. And so I had an aunt and uncle who got work in Oman in the Middle East. And so then their kids actually came to live with us while they were working in Oman.
Oh, wow.
For a while until they were able to come to the United States. But they just had such a good job in Oman. So, but yeah, I had an uncle come, I had 2 aunts come, and then on my dad's side, eventually later in life, I had another uncle and aunt come, and a cousin. But it kind of bloomed because my aunt married an American guy and had kids. And so that's kind of a different side of the family. And yeah, I mean, yeah, but I still have a lot of family in the Philippines as well.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm actually a dual citizen of the Philippines.
Oh, that's neat.
So before all of this, you got immersed, it seems like, with more family coming through and being available to you. What was it like for that transition? Do you recall for yourself, possibly growing up, knowing you're Filipino and, and they're Filipino and different, and, how it is as the immigrant story, and assimilating? Do you recall how it was for them to, be doctors where they were at? Did they encounter any kind of racism? Just how it was kind of just transitioning from Philippines to America, and just, do you recall how that was for them and growing up in that environment?
I don't really recall.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so born an American,
Yeah.
But yes, I think that it's interesting because you hear the immigrant story, right? But it's interesting, like I kind of experienced more the first born in America story,
Okay.
we call that second generation or first generation. But yeah, no, I think it was an adaptation for my parents. I asked them about it, and I've seen my family move to the United States and see what they go through with the paperwork and the immigration process. Or, I even had, how everyone's an aunt in your family. I even had a tita who was
Oh, yeah.
out of the country because of her paperwork, and it was really sad. She was a teacher already, and she was all over the news because all the kids loved her, but her paperwork wasn't in order. And so it was during this time, I guess, in the late 70s, where you were kicked out of the country. And I remember she was on the news and everything, and it was just really sad because all her students were crying. And but then I think something happened where eventually there was a time in history where there was some pardoning that happened as well, and I think my uncle was able to get his paperwork that way. But yeah, no, I grew up with all kinds of weirdness, but also like the whole process of becoming an American citizen. I experienced that with my family. But yeah, I mean, with me, a lot of it was growing up with parents that grew up in a different country. So that was really, it was interesting because when you are born here, but your parents are from a different country, they're just things that happen, right, culturally, that are off. Like I remember, like the tooth fairy, or like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So like my grandma would make me, white bread with condensed milk on it, or like corn sandwiches, or spam, but I kind of taught them. I was like, well, the kids at school have peanut butter and jelly, and, ham sandwiches, and then like the tooth fairy thing. I remember everyone at school talking about the tooth fairy. And so I lost my first tooth and I put it under my pillow, and the next morning it was still there.
Devastating.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Parents going,
Oh
my God, the tooth fairy didn't come.
Oh,
And
man.
I totally remember the story, and they were like, why don't you try again?
Oh.
Now that we've caught up.
Yeah.
Take 2.
Yeah, but yeah,
That's so cute.
I mean, my mom, I think she was really the only, female Filipina doctor growing up. I mean, for a while, I think she's an obstetrician gynecologist. So I think she went through a lot, especially with the board and all of that. And Richmond is, it definitely has racism there, and it's kind of between the lines kind of thing. That kind
Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy. Racism.
Wild. Tina, it's about states' rights. Tina.
Sorry. That's right. Civil War.
Sorry.
We digress.
Yeah, it's really yeah, so I'm pretty sure, I'm sure they went through a lot, and I've seen my grandmother, she went through a lot as well. And yeah, I think it's interesting, yeah, when your parents also moved to the country that colonized them.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that journey as well for me to understand why it was so important to fit in.
Yeah.
Like my parents were so into not, don't rock the boat, just fit in, racism, they would never admit to that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now they do a little bit, but yeah, so it was very eye-opening for me to start to understand what colonization means to the psyche, right? When you come from a country that was colonized, people coming in, Europeans or the Philippines was colonized by the Malays, the Spaniards, the Japanese, the Americans, Chinese, So it was a country that was kind of taken over, forced to be a country.
Exactly.
It's a lot of different islands, a lot of different languages. And when you're colonized, you kind of you're being told that you are second class, that you're not good enough. And it creates this, after generation after generation after generation, deep in our DNA and our psyche, this sort of kowtowing to the white patriarchal colonist way of thinking. And that was something that I knew about, but I didn't start to feel it until recently, actually, probably in the last 5 years, started to even see my own behavior around it. It was almost like we were under some sort of hypnosis.
Oh yeah. So true.
True. Yeah, that's a really cool, interesting connection between Filipino culture, or especially that first gen Filipino immigrant story. It's always assimilation. And for that to be kind of well, maybe we have a historical precedence. That's, I felt that.
Yeah.
I feel like this should be an episode.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get into those eventually, because I get that all the time, and we're coming out of AAPI Heritage Month, and I spoke on a lot of that, and it's something we have to face, and it's hard, it's difficult, and we have people that we love that are still kind of in that state, and speaking to them, it can be hard, but it has to be done. It has to be done. So staying right there in the pocket of when you were growing up, I'm sure you weren't, well, obviously, like you said, you just within the past 5 years becoming more self-aware and about our people and yourself. But were you like me at that age when, you're just wanting to fit in and you don't learn, but then you feel I don't know, no one accepts you, and you get mad at your parents for not, for me, I was mad at them for not teaching me Tagalog, but just that I was different. And then, like you're saying, you wanted peanut butter and jelly, like the other kids. Did you kind of had do you recognize, or do you feel like you had some self-hate there, and when they're trying to teach you one way, but you're also feeling different because not everyone else was like that because of your surroundings?
Yeah, I remember it was very confusing at times. So if you go to, I remember going to school and being made fun of, and then, going to my parents and them being don't, just let them be, take the higher road, all of that stuff. And I was kind of a more shy kid, but my sister was a little more, she's a lawyer now. So I do remember this one kid making fun of me, my sister punching him in the face, and then all three of us sitting in the
Love to hear it.
office. And then my mom, again, just trying to appease the situation. But yeah, no, I think that's always been my journey. I think my journey as a storyteller and an artist was knowing that I wanted to say something. I wanted to find that truth because it didn't feel right. You know what I mean? It didn't feel right to just fit in or to not say something or and in that sense, I was kind of a difficult teenager. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a rebel child, but yeah. So again, there was a lot going on, right? There's the whole like being immigrating to the United States and then having your first child in the United States kind of thing, your kids in the United States, and them thinking differently than you do. And then there's this kind of translation process going on. And then again, this sort of psyche that we're finally breaking. And this, the hypnosis, I guess, or the brainwashing of coming from a colonized state. So has been very cathartic. And I think my whole life it's been in me to that it's been bothering, it was brewing. It was like, until it finally cracked, and exploded. But yeah.
I feel that.
That's a perfect segue into what kind of creative pursuits did you engage in like middle school, high school that kind of led you to what you do now as a career?
When I was in school, I just really loved stories. And my mom is a really big reader. And so she would always, pick our library books. Like we'd go to the library and pick our like 3 books. And she would always pick what we would read. And also like at school, you could order books, I remember. And she would pick the books. And, so she would pick things like The Invisible Man and The Good Earth, and I'm like in 6th grade. But yeah, she's just, she was really a lover of stories and books. And she really loved movies as well. And she used to always tell us that that what was so great about reading, and now she says this to the grandkids, is that you get to travel, And I think also I was just always wondering, I did travel to the Philippines at a young age. I think I first went there when I was 2. And then over the years, I think I went when I was 9. And then I went again when I was in high school, then college. And then I went a lot after that. But yeah, I always was fascinated by where we came from. And, always wanted to learn about it. And my Lola was pretty much my babysitter a lot because my parents worked. And so I really learned a lot from her about the Philippines. The Filipino Lolas love to tell stories, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, stories about the white lady and stories about the dwarf that lives in the hump in the office, just a lot of stories. And also just a lot of stories of the war and what it was like when the Japanese were in the Philippines. I remember those stories, and the Americans. So I just loved writing stories and telling stories young as a kid. And I just loved art, and I was a dancer. So eventually I started doing filming dance, and I was really into photography. All my parents called those hobbies.
Yeah. Yep.
That leads into our next set of questions.
Yeah. And I also thought they were hobbies. I didn't know that I would end up doing this for a living. But I was doing it actually at a very young age. And I loved taking photographs of my family and turning them into stories. So
awesome.
I remember when my cousins came, I had a camera and we'd take photos, and then we'd line up I'd line up the photos like it was a story, and I was just fascinated. I remember my cousin Caesar came. I'd never met him before. He didn't speak any English when he arrived, and he was just a kid, poor kid, because, it's 4 girls. And he all of a sudden went to playmate, and I was fascinated by him, just fascinated. We were also not very nice to him, too, I must say. Because, it's like, oh, he's from the Philippines? And we're like, wait a minute, we're Filipino, but he's from the Philippines. I was like, be nice, that he's going to have to adapt. He had a whole other experience. Like, we were born here. He had to learn, like, I think he came here when he was like 8 or 9, And then our babysitter was Filipina, Auntie Ebet, and I learned a lot from her as well because she came from the Philippines, and yeah, she was very much part of my formative years. And she loved music and pop culture because she was young. I think she was 19. But yeah, she just loved, she had these like -1 karaoke books.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yeah, so, and she cooked a lot of Filipino food, and yeah. So, yeah, did I answer that question? I'm not sure. But
Yeah, absolutely. And then our segue to the expectations as you were growing up was that you were going to go into the medical field, right?
yeah.
So we see that that's not how things turned out. So tell us about that journey.
Well, I was still like in high school. I was really into like the arts again, like, and I was really into like the avant-garde and like modern art and like experimental film and all that stuff. But then when I went to college, I still dabbled in that. Like I still studied contemporary dance and photography, but I also was pre-med student.
Hobbies.
Yeah, I still did pre-med. Yeah. So I just, I eventually ended up in communications and studying kind of more like international journalism, and so that kind of got me to the documentary space. And I always wrote for the school paper and was the photographer for the school paper. So in college as well, I did that, and so I just was doing it anyway. You know what I mean? and then and then when I did intern on some films just to experience what that was like. And I remember telling my parents, "Oh yeah, so you go from job to job." I personally did not understand that either because I never grew up with this whole idea of going from job to job,
Yeah.
And they were like, I think you need to finish your pre-med." So even though I had gotten a degree in like communications and visual arts and stuff, I ended up going back and finishing my pre-med.
Oh wow.
But yeah, but I ended up in film anyway. So yeah, so I worked for some really great people. Like I was an assistant to Forrest Whitaker and some other interesting Lydia Pilcher. She's like kind of known in the indie film world. She's Mira Nair's producer. I don't know if you know who Mira Nair is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
how did that happen though? So like that transition of that. How did you figure out how to make that happen?
Like my parents worked all the time, so I always had to figure out everything on my own.
Yeah.
But, you know what I mean? Like, so like my parents would be like, fill out the form. So my parents made me very independent that way. My mom is a very independent woman. So yeah, when I was in New York, I just researched and found, I think it was called Independent Feature Project at the time. I think it's still called that. And I remember they had an intern board. And there was, an internship. And it just happened to be these group of people.
Oh, wow.
I guess they were like my age at the time. But yeah, so they and I was just like their little intern. And I got to work on a lot of things and meet a lot of interesting people. Like Susan Sarandon, they were doing a film with her. And they were really into theater, that whole group. Michael Moore was part of that group as well.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a little, I was kind of naive at the time. Like, I never didn't understand the film industry, and I didn't understand. But I remember the producer I was assisting, Nellie Newgell, had a first look deal, I think, with Warner Brothers, and so she had moved into their offices, and so Michael Moore had as well an office there, and he would be listening to like Nirvana the whole time, like super loud. But he liked me because I was just a kid, and he would always be like wanting to know what I was listening to and what I was doing. And then I just remember giving his number to my friend who wanted to be a documentary filmmaker. We were just we were just like barely 20. We were like, "Oh, you want to be a documentary filmmaker? Here's Michael Moore's phone number."
Oh, wow.
So he calls Michael Moore and he's like, "Hey, I want to be a documentary filmmaker." And then I remember he came by and he's like, "Did you give my phone number out?"
That's so sweet that he called him.
Yeah, and I would make all these art videos, and I remember I was interviewing at these film production companies, and I'd walk in and I'd like show them my films, and they would be like, "That's really great. So, are you interested in the receptionist job?"
Oh, oh wow.
Oh,
Well, because when you're starting out, I mean, that was when I was starting out, so you don't realize that you have to work your way to be,
Yeah. Pay your
in
dues.
the industry, yeah, in the industry. So yeah. So eventually, yeah, in the industry, I worked in production for a while, and then eventually I went to film school. I went to the American Film Institute here in Los Angeles, and I became a writer. And I got this fellowship grant from ABC Disney, and then I became a writer there. I became an animation writer. So I
Awesome.
trained on Winnie the Pooh, and I wrote on their series for two going on to 3 seasons, but they canceled the third season. And then I continued a little bit more in kids animation. But really, it was my dream to always make my own films. So I was always working on my own films on the side. And
Awesome.
so, that's a whole other journey of trying to pitch Filipino stories back.
Oh
I
yeah.
think things have shifted in the last few years, which is pretty amazing.
Oh
Kind of
yeah.
fast.
Oh
But
yeah.
but before that, like pitching a Filipino story, you got all kinds of weird reactions and no
Mm-hmm.
straight out racist comments in your face. Like, oh,
Yeah.
there's really no market for this. So can you rewrite it for a Latino market?
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
So
I definitely
true.
got that for sure. And again, I think going back to the psyche of coming from a colonized culture, I would be okay with that. You know what I mean? I would actually take time to rewrite for a Latino market.
Yeah.
And it was almost like this block that I would not allow myself to feel how painful that is,
Oh yeah.
for someone in
Yeah.
your face to tell you that and then you actually agree.
Yeah. Oh.
They basically
Yeah.
agree to being like a second class, like you don't matter, your voice doesn't matter, your story doesn't matter. So
Co-signing it.
Yep.
yeah.
Ooh.
Just like that time I was in the sound booth that one time. Right? I told it on the show. I was on a gig for Baltimore Public Television. I was doing the voiceover for this Asian character, which was this. Oh my gosh! I was a photo model for the Hispanic guy, and the sequences in the stories. But then they called me up to do a voiceover for the Asian character, and then I'll just never forget being in the sound booth and them telling me as I'm doing the lines, "Can you sound more Asian?" I felt so terrible because I then kind of gave I don't know. I was stunned, shocked, and then just kind of slowed down my voice, kind of just gave, I guess, a stereotype that I don't know where I drew it from, but it just burned my soul and was one of the things that pushed me into producing and filmmaking and other stuff, just because it hurt. But before and I want to get into that because then you start making your films and I want to get into Basoro, but how you got into the screenwriting program and you got the grants and stuff like that. Is there some nuggets of lessons that we can pull from that real quick? Because I like to kind of take some stops during these interviews to just life lesson. What would you encourage a person who's watching this right now and following your journey and wanting to follow in your footsteps that are fans like ourselves, that was an important lesson that you learned that you would want to impart to them at this stage, before you, and I'm sure there's going to be ones when you start diving into creating Basuro, creating our voice, which is so important. But like when you're doing what you had to do to get into writing and getting into these different arenas, what are some lessons that you would want to impart right now?
Well, I think for all my grants and awards and stuff, it was always actually was mostly Filipino material. It's just that they weren't producing Filipino material at the time. Um, I think that it's important to stay true to what you're passionate about, what kind of stories you want to tell, and why you want to tell these stories. Just kind of tune into that, and because it's so hard to write and make something or produce something that it shows if it's not being fueled by your truth and your passion.
Oh
So
yeah.
um, you know, for me, I really love the Filipino face and the Filipino story. I feel that that's my clay that I was born with, and so I feel that's where my strongest storytelling is. And it may not just be directly Filipino at times, but it's about the process of peeling the onion and finding your truth, your power, you know, which is your truth of just valuing yourself and taking up space and knowing that you matter, and understanding that cathartic moment when you're like, wait a minute, I was working in a system that was thinking differently. And so I have to stand up for myself and I have to break through that system. And it's easier said than done. Although where we're at now, I think in our timeline in the United States, I think we're at a really pivotal time, and also an empowering time, because just a few years ago, it was not the thing to go in a room and tell someone, hey, you know, what you're doing right now is like culturally inappropriate. Like you couldn't say things like that, or you couldn't say, hey, you know what, you can't talk to a woman like that, or you can't, you know, talk to a Filipino like that. But now it's even more than that. People in the room won't do that anymore. You know what I mean?
So sure.
Yeah, when I was a writer at Disney, the notes that I would get or things that, I mean, it wasn't racist stuff, but just the culture, the bully culture is not allowed anymore. I mean, it still may be there, but then you're going to get a bad reputation as an asshole. You know, but back then, like, you know, and when I say back then, it's not that long ago. It's like maybe like even just 5 years ago or 6 years ago, it was allowed to be that way, you know,
Oh,
like
yeah.
the bully was like the one that was successful. The bully
Oh.
was the one that was going to be, you know, so it's changing and it's really amazing. So my advice as someone who wants to go out and make their own stories or make their own films or make their own art is to really soul search and just to continue to make things, because we learn via experience. So whether it's like making a film on your iPhone or, you know, taking photos, trying out for small grants. I mean, there's so many platforms now as well. And I also really recommend being mentored. You know, like I've mentored and I've been mentored, and even to this day, I still, you know. So for my film, my mentors was Harry Yoon, who's the editor of Minari. He helped me tremendously on this film, and Ava Husson, who I had actually met at AFI, is also one of my mentors, and she's an amazing filmmaker. She has her second film now is at Cannes, and I learned so much from her. I learned the perseverance of like when you know that you're not feeling it yet. Like you have to feel when you know your piece is done.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to be really honest with yourself, because there's so much pressure to get something done already. And then what I learned from Harry was very much about when you're telling a story and you want it to be, well, especially if you're telling a narrative story. I mean, it's different. I do experimental film too, but narrative story, you want to be clear. You know, you want to make sure, or hopefully make sure, that the audience is getting what's happening, you know, and so you need to make kind of that extra effort to make sure you're hitting your transitions in the storytelling, you know, if there's kind of a big jump, is that working? And yeah, and I had a few other amazing mentors. Isabel Sandoval was my mentor as well. She really helped me with the story. And Isabel Sandoval was the one that also helped me set up my film in the Philippines, because her producer is my producer on Baserero. So the producer who's produced all three of Isabel's films, Darlene Malimas, is amazing. And so she produced my film too, Baserero. And yeah, so mentors, you know, are really, really, and also Kevin Chinoy mentored me a little bit on this too. And he produced Tangerine and Florida Project. And So I think it depends like what kind of filmmaker you want to be, right? Like, but it's good to learn from those who've worked on work that you admire and you love. Like, or if it's not their work, it's something about that person and who they are that inspires you. Um, and to be okay with not knowing, and you don't have to know everything. You can learn as you go, but be humble about that. Like, and taking notes or taking criticism, I think, is an art form as well. I know that as a working writer, there's a lot of writers who have huge egos, and they don't know, they're like, no, it's got to be like this. But really, filmmaking, narrative filmmaking or commercial filmmaking is a collaborative art form. Like my film is not just me. It's my DP, it's Darlene, it's my production designer, it's my PAs, it's my, it's the editors, the assistant editors, the sound guys. That's what made the film. I went in with a vision and a screenplay, but they brought so much to the table. My actors, the sound designers, it's a big collaborative venture.
Man,
Awesome.
oh, man.
So
This
many
took us to
lessons.
school.
Multiple nuggets there. I'm like,
I know. We just got a masterclass just now, a straight up masterclass, like completely. I agree.
Over there. I love it. But that's a great transition into how you got your film off the ground.
Oh my gosh, what a crazy story. So I was going to make a feature actually about a Filipina girl in Virginia, like growing up, like being taken care of her grandmother, and then her uncle comes to America.
We still need that. We still need that, by the way. I want that.
And I went through that was the film that I went through a whole journey on. It got a lot of attention. So my screenplay, which I also wrote, my thesis screenplay at AFI was about an American girl in the Philippines during World War II, and what it was like there when the Japanese invaded and stuff. And it won the award at graduation. And then after that, I wrote this film called Moo Moo, which also got a lot of attention. And Mark Ruffalo actually was attached at one point to direct it.
Oh,
it's kind of
wow.
funny. He's such a nice person, by the way. But now looking back, I'm like, that was weird. Anyway, it's because I had all these white producers attached. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
So I had this one producer who's actually a friend of mine, and she was very loyal to the project, I think, and she tried, but looking back now, it just wasn't the right match, because the project, it was a lot of it was me. Again, this is what I meant by this cathartic breakthrough. I needed to stop kowtowing to a patriarchal kind of way of thinking, and to be a filmmaker and to tell honest, authentic stories. You gotta be able to stand your ground, and so for many years trying to make that feature, I didn't stand my ground, and I did, had these great producers attached who had connections and were producing indie films, and they thought my film was promising, but again, they were questioning the market for a Filipino-American film. So anyway, eventually, so I went to the Philippines to attach my actor to be in this film in Virginia. It takes place in Virginia. And that's how it started. So I was actually going to make a feature film. But I brought the producer with me because I kind of just stood up and I said, you know what, I'm going to help produce this too. And, I'm going to direct it. And so I brought that producer with me. And I realized when we were in the rooms pitching in the Philippines, it was huge for me. I realized we were talking about two different stories. Her story was definitely from a white perspective, and mine was different. And I had to tell her this and had to break up with her and be like, this isn't the right fit. She wanted to co-direct it with me, actually. And I realized I realized what I was doing. You know what I mean? I was just so desperately wanting this film to get made, and people that could help me get it made. But what made it worse is she got pissed off because she was
Oh.
very loyal to the project. Yeah.
Mm.
And so she did not make it easy for me to get the rights back on the script.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, so it was very cathartic for me to realize my behavior around that, and realize also that white privilege that was going on as well. Like, who would claim who would claim copyright on a Filipino American story when, like, yeah, exactly. It's so dumb. It's white privilege, basically. And in the end, I think she realized that, but at the time, white people weren't aware of that way of thinking. For them, it was, still like, well, I worked on this, I own part of it. Anyway, so I had already attached Jericho to the feature. So I called Jericho and I'm like, well, it's not going to work out with this producer. And I said, so my whole right side froze, it was physically stressful for me. I had to get steroid shots.
Oh my God, literally.
Yeah, it was deep.
Wow.
I don't think it was just the film, I think it was,
Yeah.
we were talking about the psyche of my family and being Filipino and
Mm.
generation after generation of kowtowing and just doing what you're.
Kowtowing. What is that? I've
Um,
never heard that before, and I love it.
Like Japanese, like that, when you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, so amazing. I was just, again, at that point, I had to just be honest and share with them what happened. And I was so embarrassed, but also it was a real lesson because everyone stayed with me in the Philippines. Like Darlene stayed with me, Jericho Rosales, who's a huge actor in the Philippines, stayed with me, and I wrote up a short film. You know what I mean? And I was like, you know what, I can get this finance, I'll crowdfund and all this stuff. So yeah, so that's how the production side of it came. And then I just started really thinking again about my voice and the kind of stories I wanted to tell. And I really wanted, I knew I was going to go to the Philippines to make the movie, so the short film. So I started thinking about what called me in the Philippines, growing up and traveling there, and it was always the fishermen. So I was always attracted to the Filipino fishermen because the Philippines, is an island, many, many islands, and fishermen are everywhere in the Philippines. And they're of the earth, but they're also affected by policy, and they're also affected by culture and also ways of seeing. And so I started looking into the fishermen and kind of painting a picture about a fisherman and just doing a lot of research. And that's where I came across this Al Jazeera news report about the drug war. The drug war started with the President Duterte. He came in 2016, and one of his campaign promises was to deal with the drug problem in the Philippines. Anyway, so it became pretty bloody because his philosophy is if you do drugs or if you sell drugs, your life isn't worth anything. You can be killed. You know what I mean? And it kind of invited that mentality. And it also created a real deep-seated fear in the people. So I think when he first became president, a lot of people got killed because people were killing off people that knew people. You know what I mean? Like it's all entrenched in the barangays and the police, and so it's pretty complicated, but not. But anyway, I came across this article about a fisherman who was being interviewed by an Al Jazeera news reporter who was sharing that he and other fishermen were dumping bodies for the authorities on the side of the road and into Manila Bay, like, drug pushers and users and people that were being killed in the drug war. And so I just found that really, wow, and also first of all, I was like, I went to some of my producers and like, is it okay to tell a story about the drug war? But then I thought about it more and more, and I was like, what attracted me, because I'm definitely against the drug war, but I think what attracted me to this story was not only the horrendous, and the human rights issues and the human, value issues, but was the fisherman himself and what that must be like to need money and dump bodies for the authorities and become involved in that, right? And to me, it really is about exploring the psyche again, the psyche of not feeling good enough or not valued, and no one's paying attention to you, kind of thing. So, yeah, I think that's what attracted me to the story. So I started just building the story that way, and then I'm a big immerser, so I have a lot of documentary experience as well. So I just went to the Philippines and I scouted and I hung out with the fishermen and just really tried to understand their stories and what their lives were like, and spending time with their families and having lunch. And I had my actor do the same. But yeah, but he actually used to work in the fish port, so he comes from humble beginnings actually, even though he's a huge actor there. So he brought a lot to the table. And then just talking, to my colleagues there and friends there and family about their perspective on the drug war, and why is it that it's okay to kill someone who does drugs or sells drugs? Like, why is that okay, right? And in the Al Jazeera news report, the code word was basura. So they would call the dead bodies basura, which means trash in Tagalog, and it also means trash in Spanish.
Yeah.
And as you know, Philippines was a Spanish colony for 300 years, and the Tagalog language has a lot of Spanish words in it, which is national language of the Philippines. So that's kind of where it was at. And I really, I loved my time in the Philippines, just having these discussions and immersing myself, because a lot of people are like, what is some girl that grew up in Virginia, I bet she's Filipino, but then she's going into the Philippines and telling this kind of story, And I wasn't about the poverty in the sense of like filming the poverty. I was just filming the day in the life of, and where they actually really live, and where they actually really fish, and where these things actually really happen. So I just made it very neorealist in that way. There's a type of filmmaking called neorealism. I just shot it as is. I did not want it to be poverty porn, though. So I did not, point the camera at certain things, even though, yes, the fish port, the urban fish port, is covered in trash. You can see that in the film, but that's just really the way it is. But of course, I could have moved the camera and, pointed at the trash or pointed at the dead things that we saw, and but I didn't do that. So it's been it was quite a journey, like finding the story and getting the story. And then I started to think that maybe that was a fake news report because there were no other reports about this, and I was doing my research, especially as a writer and journalist background and documentary and stuff. So I started to question. So I went to the Human Rights Commission, and then I went to Amnesty International, and then I even went to the government human rights office, just to kind of understand if this was really happening, and all of them in their own words said it is. But what's so crazy is even after the film got produced, I was renting this Airbnb, and the chick that I was renting to was like, hey, I only know one other filmmaker. She's a doc filmmaker. You gotta meet her, and she works for NPR, and she's Filipina, from the Philippines. And we met up, had coffee, and she's like, oh, what's your film about? And I said, oh, well, it's about this fisherman that, dumps bodies, and it's really about his psyche, a character study about him and the next day after he does the job. And she was stark white, and she said, I produced that.
Wow.
That Al Jazeera news report.
Wow.
I was like, oh yeah, it's inspired. And then she was like, yeah, I was covering the drug war. And she's like, after that one, I just needed to stop, because when you're a journalist, you have to vet that this is true. And so what she told me is she went out with them to dump the bodies to make.
Oh my God.
Al Jazeera, yeah.
Wow.
No.
Oh.
Oh.
So you got the confirmation. You weren't even looking for it, but like
I
the
know.
universe put it in the universe let you know that you were on the right track. My God. Wow.
Wow. That's amazing.
I was like, I mean, I knew the film was already done, and I knew it was inspired by the fishermen. I was taking fiction narrative liberties, right? To just
Right.
after studying a lot of fishermen, but there was a part of me that was like, gosh, this could be fake news, like,
Mm.
but it is Al Jazeera, and they're pretty respectable.
Yeah.
But when she told me that she went out with them to make sure that that's what they really do, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
She's a really hardcore journalist. Yeah.
Wow.
She works she's the one with NPR now in the Philippines. And
Wow.
so, yeah.
Ah, man. Eileen, I've seen the film, and it's amazing. So well done, so well shot, so very real. And like as you said, I'm so happy that you kept the camera where it needed to be. And just every shot, it was amazing. And like you said, and I'm so happy you said this, because sometimes, as a filmmaker myself as well, like, you don't want it to be poverty porn, but you kept it where it needed to be. You followed the story, and it spoke its own truth. One of the things I was nervous though, and watching it and knowing the logistics of filmmaking, getting permits and stuff, because at the time, I think when I saw it, the film, I think also recently saw 1,000 Cuts, Maria Reza, with what she's doing and what we know. And, Duarte is, he's our own Trump in the Philippines, right? He's evil. I was like, feared for you. Like, I was curious how this was even able to be made, with just knowing how he is and what they were doing, and this stuff was happening. Like, did you get any feedback, and are you scared to go back to the Philippines with something like this in a way, even though it's fictional? I don't know. Like I'm afraid for Maria Reza, just after having watched 1,000 Cuts and just her going back and forth and dealing what she's dealing with, and just as journalists, as filmmakers, as creatives, because of just what that regime is in the Philippines. Like, it's scary to me, but that's one of my goals in life, because I've never been to the Philippines, is to visit my homeland, but I'm also scared, honestly.
Oh, don't be scared. Yeah, no, I totally understand the fear. It's a serious problem in the Philippines. The Philippines is one of the top countries where journalists get killed. And Maria Ressa is amazing. Rappler is amazing. It's more the free press in the Philippines. And sadly, Duterte regime is not a democracy. It's a dictatorship. So basically, as you know, they shut down the free television there, ABS-CBN, the broadcasting. Now ABS-CBN is existing more online and in their other ways. But they did that, and he allowed that to happen. And then also threats with the some of the newspapers in the Philippines that I've heard of. But Maria Ressa is interesting because she's in a way kind of could be our savior in many ways, because she's in the limelight, right? But think about, there's so many journalists that aren't in the limelight that are killed or imprisoned.
Exactly.
And activists and environmentalists. It's a big thing that's happening. It's very quieted down, in the Philippines. People don't want to talk about it. They don't want to do it. And I can understand it's fear, right? When you have an administration that will put you in prison without a trial, or kill you, extrajudicial killings, you create a system of fear. And again, if we think about colonization, right, I think this is kind of a product, I think, of colonized way of thinking on our own people, like us doing it to ourselves. And I think, though, my film, and I asked my producers too, because they were taking a risk too, especially Darlene, and she wasn't scared, because this film is definitely about the drug war, but also for me, it's not a political film. This film to me is about self-value and self-rights. You know what I mean? This is about our values. Like, are we going to keep valuing some people more than others or less than others, and it's okay to just kill? And are we going to allow that system to keep continuing? And Philippines, for all of us, that's where a big part of who we are. Even though we grew up in America, the Philippines, the country itself, and the soul of that place, and the fact that the majority of the country is poor, and a lot of people say that the war on drugs is a war against the poor because the ones that are getting killed are the poor. The ones that are not having trials and being stuffed in prisons and waiting for their trials for, like, have you seen Happy Jail? Justway, yeah, that's real. And she's brilliant, by the way.
Oh yeah,
you should definitely interview her. She's amazing. But yeah, so that stuff is real, and I feel like that is very reflective of what even us as Filipino Americans have inside of us. This kind of poverty way of thinking, and fear of going there, or fear of being poor, or fear of or I am poor, so I don't deserve this or that. It's really part of the Filipino psyche, and I feel like the more and more we shine the light on it and start to discuss it and start to give value and understand that being poor is not something to be shamed for, or that you're less than, and that you don't have if you don't give opportunity to the poor and value them, it's just playing this cycle over and over and over
exactly
again. And then it's giving this psyche, it's feeding the psyche that we're not valuable and that we don't matter. And it's sad because in the Philippines itself, my fellows there, my friends there, and colleagues and family, they'd be like, well, you don't live here. Like this, you don't, even though I do live there a lot right now, but they're like, you can leave, this is where we have to survive. And it's become so complicated in that sense, It is, to me, it's complicated and it's not. Like if you go to the heart of it, when you help your own people, and you will be helped yourself. Like, that you will rise as well. But that's a hard thing to trust or to understand because it's so in the psyche of both the what they call themselves, they class themselves like class D, class E, class, it's like a classist system. They use those words there. So yeah, it's really I don't know. I just find that as Filipino Americans, right, and us turning to our own psyches and trying to understand the complexity of it and peeling the onion and finding our value and our voice, it can only, and then you go to the Philippines and you see all of that as well on a very deep level and in a level where you might get killed if you speak up and say something. It's tough, But as a social impact, I consider myself a social impact filmmaker.
Oh yeah.
I love telling stories that help shine the light on putting out questions and exploring these issues of how we can find our voice and strength and human value and human rights. So it's the risk you take, I guess. Maybe I'm on a list. Probably on a list.
Yes, you are. I just, man, you are, and I can't thank you enough. And it's difficult as is, as you stated, it has to be said. We have to have these conversations or else things are going to just continue. This cycle is going to continue. And I thank you so much because it has to happen. And it's brilliant. And yeah, you deserve flowers for that. I'm giving you flowers because I'm so inspired by it as a filmmaker. It makes me, when I'm choosing projects or thinking about what I want to work on, why am I doing this? Who's the intended audience? It helps give you focus a little bit. And we need that because sometimes, a lot of times I think there's a lot of fluff, and because a lot of, as an Asian American filmmaker as well, and Filipino, a lot of our stories aren't out there. So why would I want to just add fluff content when I could do something that could make a difference? What am I doing to help with the message or the avenue or that I have if I'm doing that? And no, and you are so inspiring. I'm just, loving what you just said because it's so real and it's so important. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's so many ways, right? Like Tresse that's coming out is really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yes.
And it's interesting because it's I know all about it because it was very like everyone was talking about it in the Philippines because I've been living in Manila the last, I guess I'm back here since the pandemic, since June, but I was in Manila for like almost 3 years. But so yeah, like the whole Trece thing is really interesting because there's a little bit of a socio-political commentary in it as
Yeah.
well, even though it's kind of this dark noir kind of comic book with, all the creatures of the Philippines and
Yeah.
streets of Manila. It's really interesting. I'm really excited to see it. But I get like Blackish, for example, I think is a very interesting way also of exploring racism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's ways, that can be entertaining as well, to bring up things to think about and discuss in life. Like this short is a bit intense. It's, and it doesn't really answer anything. So it's really a character study of a psyche. Um,
So now that that's out there and it's still being shown and seen, and if you haven't seen it, I hope y'all see it when it comes out and it's available to you. What other projects can we also give light and love to that you also have coming forward out for us, Eileen?
Well, I'm working on a feature film with, so the actor in my film, his name is Jericho Rosales, and he's a very big actor in the Philippines with a big heart. He's such a great, great guy. Comes from humble beginnings. Like I told you, he won a contest, like a Mr. Pogi contest.
I love it.
That's how
Mr.
he
Pogi.
became found. Like, and he said he just did it because he and his friends wanted to win, like, the 500 pesos or whatever.
Yeah.
But then he became but he's still a very great guy. So anyway, he and I are collaborating on a feature. A lot of people wanted me to make the short into a feature. And so I explored that for a year. And I came across something that I was more passionate about. I was kind of inspired by some of the journalists that are covering the drug war in the Philippines. Rafi Lerma is one of them. He has some really famous photographs. He was, you get a little bit jaded as an activist and things aren't happening and you feel like you're just pointing to the bad stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And this has become my philosophy in life anyway, is the solution, like being in solution, right? Like we've got climate change happening, we've got, Trump happening, we've got, the killings happening in the Philippines, all of this stuff. And it's so easy to become overwhelmed and freeze. And it's also so easy to just go down some dark rabbit hole, right? And just be like, life is over and this sucks. But I think for me, like, I like to explore, like, what are the solutions, right? So I came across these really amazing people in the city of Caloocan, which is a big city, part of Metro Manila. It's where most of the killings happened. The killings are now in like the 20,000s, according to human rights people. According to the administration, it's a lot less than that, a lot less. So I met these amazing kind of visionaries that are, the Caloocan is the first city in the Philippines to start this concept, community rehab. So they don't have rehab like we do here in the United States, where you really go do soul searching and you have therapy and you have like group, 12-step kind of stuff, or, family, and they have it for the rich, like the wealthy, like they have centers like that. And then they had these rehabs in the prison, which is like Zumba and like, yeah, you have a social worker. But these guys, so it's like these couple bishops, the mayor of Caloocan, the main lawyer of Caloocan, and also social workers from the University of Philippines have created a program. And so supposedly a program where you get delisted. So what happens in the Philippines is you get put on a list. In Manila, it's all separated by barangays, kind of like our things. And those barangay leaders create a list who they think are using drugs and who are selling drugs. And once you're on that list, it's pretty scary. Anyway, so they supposedly created a program. They have created a program for real that supposedly will grant delisting, which is a pretty amazing thing. But the program, which is so amazing, is that it's very much the Filipino way. So it's like family counseling,
Oh, wow.
church, learning new trades so that you can get a job. The 12-step circle work where you're really soul searching, and so I started attending those in the Philippines and meeting the attendees. And they even started some programs in the prison as well, and it was just very moving. And they do it very Filipino style, like with the big microphone. They're passing it around, they're
Oh, wow.
pouring their hearts out. And they come as a whole family. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because
that's
Philippines
great.
is not an I culture; it's a we culture, right? So I'm basically I have my draft now. Well, I call it a vomit draft, which I did. I started it in the Philippines, all the research and hanging out with everyone and immersing myself in the world. And then when I got here, I started writing it in a writer's group. So I have a draft now. And it's a
Okay.
father-daughter story about a father who's on the list, and but he is able to be part of this community rehab. So he's going through the process of rehab. And I think that's a big solution for Philippines, like being able to see people as human and that these problems we have can be overcome and we can become even better for it, and just the humanity of addiction. Like addiction isn't a crime, you're not a villain because you do drugs. You know what I mean? So, and it's so interesting because, it's just, so that's what the film I'm doing with Jericho is about. And I don't know, with COVID, things have gotten a little weird because I'm not sure when I can go back.
Yeah.
I'm hoping we can go back in January, but we'll see.
Do you plan to shoot that? I would assume once it's all realized and ready for production, do you plan to shoot in the Philippines, that project?
Yeah, and Jericho, my actor, is producing it.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So his company is producing it. Yeah.
All right.
So I'm working on that. And then I am developing still kind of off what I had started. I think right now I'm just sketching out all the characters of growing up in the 80s in Virginia and what that was like. Kind of like, have you guys seen Rami?
Oh, yeah. With Rami Malek. No, not Rami Malek, but I forgot the actor's name.
I think his name's Rami, right, in real life? Anyway, maybe not.
Yusuf. Is it Rami Yusuf?
Yeah, I think it's Rami Yusuf.
Yeah.
The television series about the
On Hulu, I think. I think it's on
Yeah.
Hulu. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
I was super inspired by that. And
Okay.
I was like, just the realness of a family, in the United States that
Totally.
is from a different culture. They're Muslims and stuff. So so I've just been sketching out characters. I'm in a writers group in New York that's mostly novelists and short storytellers and poets. And so I've been using that space to explore characters from growing up as Filipina and a Filipino family in Virginia. And it might be a series of short stories, but I'm thinking of developing it into a television series.
Okay. I love it. We need more of our stories out there. And I feel, as you're saying, in the past couple of years, it just, we're starting to get out there and the climate is there. And I feel it completely. We started this ShoPowSho in the past, year and a half, and just it's grown. And I feel amazed and honored to help give your story and give other people's story out there to show that we're all doing it. We're all going through it. Our stories aren't monolithic. It's important. And I feel like a renaissance is occurring as well. Like as filmmakers, as creatives, I'm in this Filipinx Actors Barkada group. We just did a live Zoom performance. So I have a bunch of Filipino actors if you're looking for some, Eileen, amazing actors. And we've got this, I think you and I are in the Filipinx Filmmakers group on Facebook as well. And I'm just so inspired by all of us that are in there that are just workshopping and building and networking and creating. Like it's our time. I just can't wait. The future is so, bright, I think, and I'm just so inspired. And you sharing your story today just got me more infused, even more. And I just can't thank you enough for coming out.
thank you three enough. I mean, you guys, you're the ones that are doing it. You're making the space. And I think that's it. Like you're making space, you're creating space, you're putting our, your voices and our voices and ideas out there. And that's how it's going to happen. That's Ava DuVernay's philosophy, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
when you're still kind of, your story or your culture is not out in the mainstream or what people are seeing. You just kind of have to make that space happen, because we are out there. Everyone knows a Filipino.
Heck yeah.
Right.
Like, we're everywhere.
Totally.
And so,
That's right.
we're an audience. Like that whole thing about there's no audience. It's just BS, and it's just again
Completely.
here and kind of not like it's a very functional way of thinking, like a very limited way of thinking. And so I just thank you all three of you for having the vision to do this, you know what I mean, and just having the courage and just making the space. And kudos, thank you.
Thank you. That's awesome. That's I wanted to mention one thing that you were talking about earlier, that had come up in a previous episode. It was one with Ryan Riddle. We were talking about sharing stories and the differences in Filipino experiences and the importance of telling stories and sharing stories, but not exploiting stories. And I know one thing that I do in my work is sharing stories. And I think about that every single day of telling an authentic story and telling the truth and sharing my vision through it and sharing my truth through it. So when you were speaking on that really resonated with me. And I was like, dude, in the notes.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, I think as a storyteller, right, you feel it when you're writing that, and you feel when something doesn't feel right, and you kind of sometimes need to take a step back and be like, okay, am I telling this, being scared about not going into a space that might not feel comfortable for me, but I need to go there, or am I like trying to please someone with this story, or is this story really, and it's a balancing act. And I think that's the journey of being a writer, right, or a storyteller, is how to find that in the creative process. And that's great. That's really awesome, Tina.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. All right. Well, I think our last thing that we always like to ask, since we are with the Nerds of Color, is our nerd check. So if you have your very own TED Talk, what you tell us? What are you just nerdy and into?
If I had my own what? TED Talk?
Oh, you have your own TED Talk. What could you just nerd out about?
Oh, what can I nerd out about? I guess I could really nerd out about the crazy thoughts in our heads. You know what I mean? All the thousands of identities that we have in our heads and our voice, and like the things that we tell ourselves about. Like I'm all into that whole like head thing, that head space, like
really breaking down the psyche.
Consciousness, yeah, like breaking down the psyche. I could talk about that kind of stuff.
Very cool.
Heck yeah.
I feel like we need a bottle of Hennessy and we need to talk about what's in our minds.
There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack. Yes.
Gin.
Gin. Okay.
Water journey.
Amazing. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic, Eileen. I adore you. And I think you're so amazing and you're so brave and giving and telling our stories with social impacts, and that you are, and because it's so important. And it helps change the world, makes it a better world. And, being a father, and that's kind of what I want to do with my stories, because we want our children to have this change and have a better future. And that's why it's so important to me. So thank you so much. One last thing is for our audio listeners, because we also have an audio podcast outside of this. We strip this audio and we make it available for those that are listening that want to follow you, know everything that you have coming out so they can support it like ourselves. We want to show you love. Can you give us your socials and all of that so people can reach out to you?
Oh, sure. So on Facebook, it's at Eileen Cabiling, and then I also have the film page, which is at Basurero Film, and then same on Instagram. It's at Eileen Cabiling and at Basurero Film. And we have a website for the film as well. And yeah, the film is on tour right now. It will be shown here at the LA International Film Festival, I think coming up in the month of July, and then it will be at Woods Hole up in Massachusetts. I think it's showing in Canada as well. And then it will be also showing at the Richmond International Film Festival.
Heck yeah, going back home.
Because my
Full circle.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll come out to the Richmond Film Festival?
Oh yeah, I'll be there.
Oh really? Oh, okay. I might make a side trip then. I might have to head down just so I can meet you. I'd love to meet you.
Love that. Yeah, I would so love that. Yeah, it would be so great. I mean, I'll let you guys know about the screening. I don't know what the dates are yet, but they're gonna screen it there. I think
Definitely.
It's like their 10th year. It's a small festival, but it's like their 10th year.
Okay. Well, I want to show support and we'll be in touch and with everything you have. I want to show it love. We consider once you come on, you're part of our ShoPowSho family, and you know how family is. We support each other, or at least you're supposed to. But this family does that. So we're going to show you all the love with everything you have coming on and that you're doing. Thank you so much. Salamat po, Eileen. Appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Boom, there you go, Eileen Cabiling. If you get a chance and you see Basurero coming to you, you're gonna want to check it out. It's sad, it's hard, but it's very real and it's so important. And it inspired me to just tell our story. You know, as dirty and as grimy as it could look, and as how sad it can be. It's taking that and inspiring you to push you to this, in a way, to like never get to that point again. Like, as y'all know, I shared in my story, for me personally, that I almost committed suicide, but it took that point to really push me, to motivate me, and to inspire me to never get to that point again, and just keep building and creating like this amazing relationship that I have with the amazing Ates. And we're doing the show to create love and give light to our people. That's what that can do, you know, just taking that negative and turning it into a positive. And so thank you, Eileen, for coming on and sharing what you've done. And that's what I learned from this, to just keep creating and building and not letting people shut you down. How about you all?
Yeah, I mean, she had great lessons for us.
Masterclass.
I wrote them all down. But yeah, just kind of that, again, telling you to stay true to your passions, but also like stay true to what you know and to your truth. Like, I thought it was incredibly strong of her to go from, you know, a feature film to a short film, because it wasn't going in the direction that she originally had. Like when she was saying that she froze, I was like, oh yeah, I bet that's a lot to kind of go through. And she's like, yeah, I had to get steroid shots. I was like, oh, you physically froze. Like this was, you know, a thing that you really had to go through. And, but through it, you know, she stuck to her truth. So that's just super important. Get a mentor, kids.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. She just had a lot of nuggets there. And again, I really appreciated, how she described sharing the story and not exploiting the story. As some stories do get exploited. So that was, we love to hear it.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Everything, so much to learn, so much to unpack. Definitely nice. Always nice to talk to somebody who has like a really good firm grasp on who they are and what they want to do.
Oh yeah.
And really that whole like that colonized mentality.
Oh yeah.
And the Filipino people pleasing, like our need to please our parents need for us to please society, like for us to have neutral, pleasant jobs like healthcare. It's just,
Yeah, it was so deep and real, and we're all still unpacking that and trying to feel our way through that. And it's hard, but it's it's what we got to do now, so that way future generations don't have to deal with the stigma. It's on us to start healing and fixing that. And that's so important. This was amazing, y'all. I'm like juiced now.
Ooh,
It's late, but I'm juiced.
like, this is
it energizes
stuff I'm going
me.
to refer to in future episodes.
Ladies, always a pleasure, and you always put a smile on my face. Y'all keep me energized as well, because this is so important, and I can't thank you enough for joining me on this mission to help give this love and light out, and to help make that difference. So for those of y'all that are out there that are hearing us do our thing and want to reach out to us, hit us up, and let's kick it off. Let's let them know how they can reach out to us and tell us what they feel about this episode, what they want to see in future episodes, and what can we do to just put out that message. Who wants to go first? Tag, you're it.
I'll go first.
Yes.
All right. Oh God. Okay. Now
we're like
Kataphorric. You can hit me up at Kataphorric on Twitter, on Instagram, or on TikTok. We also have a ShoPowSho TikTok where you can see a little behind the scenes for a little bit more info. You can follow us on Patreon or just buy us a coffee.
All right.
And I am Viva Valentina. You can find me at viva.valentina on Instagram and TikTok. You can also find me on Twitter and chess.com at Viva Valentina XO.
Heck yeah. Follow the amazing Ates. I love them so much. I follow them. You're going to want to know what's going down. Hit us up. We'd appreciate it. And you just reminded me, the chess bully over there. Shout out to Xavi de Guzman, my boy. I didn't even bother talking about the Battle of Mactan and Lapu Lapu this episode, but here, I just did it now. I want to give him props. He's working on Easter Sunday with Joe Coy. And he was like, hey, he did a birthday post because apparently him and Joe share the same birthday. And so that's the way he announced to the world that he's working on it. So I'm going to try and get Xavi back to talk about Easter Sunday with what he's doing with Joe and what Joe is doing, because Joe's starting to make a show now. We're getting Joseph. I don't know if y'all seen that word. So, Joe Coy's trying to build out the community, man, and get more opportunities. You love to see it. So proud.
Yes.
The
awesome.
Pride is beaming. So just wanted to show love to Xavi and everything he's doing out there, because he remembers and hits us up all the time, or at least he tags me, yo, P, we're doing this. I'm like, oh, go ahead, bro. So mad love to him. Kuya P, you can follow me at Strain since 1977, as well as at Kataphorric, here at the ShoPowSho with the amazing Ates, and our home for the ShoPowSho, the Nerds of Color, on everything, and NRW, New Release Wednesday, where nerds rule the world. That's where we're also at, everywhere. Everything, doing it big, shining, making you smile, because that's what it's all about. I love y'all. Mahakita, salamat, amazing Ates, Kuya P. Mahakita, salamat, we're out of here.
Mahakita din.
Boom.
I'm Eileen Cabiling, and I am a Filipino-American filmmaker, and I will be guesting on the ShoPowSho. Hope you can check it out. Hi, my name is Eileen Cabiling, and I am a Filipino-American filmmaker, mostly focusing on the Filipino face and the Filipino diaspora in our stories, really peeling the layer of how diverse we are as a people. My Filipino heritage is super important to me because it is my clay. I think it's the clay and the clay that I was born into for my work as an artist, and we have so much to explore. So thank you.